today. I'll be leaving tomorrow with my beautiful sweetheart off to Thailand for a month to do some work. And what I wanted to bring forward to you today was a subject of relationships. And let's talk about romantic relationships, because that's really the area where I know I feel some of my buttons pushed, and I'm sure some of you might be in the same space. So let's first discuss what that means. Oftentimes we get into these relationships, and have you ever heard of that word attraction? So often we're attracted to another individual, often because we like the way they look, we see things inside of them that we see inside of ourselves. There's a lot of reflection. And in many ways, a relationship is that, because when we can see another individual and we can see that level of reflection in them that we recognize inside of ourselves, it's beautiful. It really elevates our awareness, it elevates our potential, it elevates everything that we're doing in the world, and we can really see that beautiful emanation of spirit, of God, of love within that person to which we spend our time with, who we laugh with, who we cry with, who we play with, etc. But the challenge is when that person that we become so vulnerable with, that we really open into that heart space. We don't do that with everybody in the world. When we're walking down the street and we're having a conversation, or we run into our neighbor, or we see someone out at the store, we're not immediately opening into the deep spaces of our heart. But when we're in a relationship with someone day after day after day, we naturally just open up more and more and more, and that's a beautiful way of being. But let's look at the dynamics of that. So if we are this beautiful spiritual being having a human form, walking through life, learning, growing, loving, then the people, the places, the experiences that we draw into our life are there for our evolution and growth. So if you want to call it this crazy manipulative game, etc., then let's look at the relationships that we have, the romantic partnerships that we have that we draw into our lives. Naturally, it elevates us, it brings us up, but at the same time, when we open our heart in that way, it really can bring some great pain and shadows that come with it, because there are reasons that we're attracted to this person. Yeah, it can be their looks, it can be their personality, but often the things that we're attracted the most to are the things that we're not seeing inside of ourselves. So on a very conscious level, we see this physical world reality that we're attracted to an individual. We can mentally process it and comprehend why they're in our lives. But then when you get into the deeper layers of that, the emotional baggage that still is unprocessed between our past and our future projected fantasies, then we recognize more and more of why this person is in our life, and why we have, whether consciously or unconsciously, brought them into our lives. So as just a simple exercise for all of you listening to this, think about a statement. What is something you would say you always do? Let's say you're like, I am always a great listener, no matter what's going on, I always listen. Or think about another thing. I never would do that. I never would act in that way or be that certain way. And now let's look at the statements always and never. They're two very strong sort of superlatives. They're increased in a way of being that we always and never are never one way or another. So we're not always a good listener, or never going to be manipulative, or always being a particular pattern, or never going to be bashful. Whatever the statement or what it is, often when we look at our partner and we have that moment of friction where they're acting in a certain way, is the way in which they're acting, is that similar to what you feel like you never act as? I would say chances are it's probably going to be, because the very essence that you think you never act in a certain way, then spirit, destiny, God, whatever you want to call it, has brought that person into your life to force you to see the other side of what you think you're never acting as. So all these relationships are in our lives is just acting out the ways in which we are not being in our world. So if I feel like there's some sort of personality trait or action or way of being that I am never doing or always doing, then the partner who I have opened my heart to, opened my life to, opened my world to, is going to demonstrate that characteristic as a perception of my own mind until I can learn to love and appreciate it and see the equal amount of benefits to that characteristic and the equal amount of drawbacks. Now that can be really challenging, because as soon as that person starts to act that way, our emotions flare because it's so deep rooted in our being. And all this energy comes up and up. And I say this because in my own partnership, in a beautiful woman that I've been learning with and growing with and loving with such immense intensity and visions and ideas and everything that we're creating, at the same time as our hearts have opened, it's brought forward some aspects of our being that we haven't looked at, that has brought that to the surface. But being able to be in a romantic partnership, along with a friendship, along with someone I can honestly share the depth within here, as long as the depth within here, and do so in a very vulnerable way, it feels icky, it feels gross, it feels difficult to really open ourselves to the parts that we have insecurities with. And it's something I've just been going through myself, and I continue to go through. I've seen it in other relationships I've had, and I see it very prominently now. Mainly because I recognize the value and the intensity of the gifts and the wisdom that each one of us is bringing out into the world. But to complement that and synthesize all of that understanding in a way in which it's going to bring our unprocessed emotions, our misinterpretations of the world. And the misinterpretation is believing that we're never one way and always another way. We are everything. Every single human characteristic, every single trait we embody. So if I have a judgment on somebody who's acting a particular way, then that person, the place, the something in my life is going to show that judgment to me until I can recognize and feel the benefit of it. It's a challenging game that we're in, and that's why the work I do is life beyond comfort. Because to choose that life beyond comfort, it's to choose that when the emotions flare, when all the hell breaks loose and everything goes a little bit haywire, we have the tools, we have the techniques to know how to go within, to know how to have honest, open, heart-centered communication with a person, with an individual, with someone who we have opened our heart, our life, and our soul to. And when we're willing to be that vulnerable, when we're willing to have that space of authenticity, it creates and opens that space for that person to do the same. And some of what I'm saying here might sound a little bit foggy or not so clear, so if you have questions, feel free to ask me. But essentially, to break it down, this individual, this romantic partnership is demonstrating to you all of the disowned parts of you that you haven't learned to love and appreciate. That might be the things that you put high on a pedestal. That may be characteristics that you think you put low into a pit. Both sides of that is who you are. And this person is representing, they're reflecting that to you. The same way they are reflecting your own greatness is the same way they're reflecting your own challenges and maybe feelings of unworthiness or anything else that comes forward. So to say thank you to that person, and then to go inside and do the inner work to see where the advantages, the drawbacks, where all of these levels of deep patterning existing. And when you can literally dissolve some of these feelings, some of these emotions, and you process through that emotion, and then you dissolve it, it's like, where did that even come from? Because it's no longer in the system, and you see this person in a new light. Your awareness comes forth, and you see the life, the vision, the elevation of your own soul at a higher and higher and deeper level. And that's what this is all about. It's about utilizing these romantic relationships for your growth. Utilizing that person as representing something that is a little bit foggy or unclear inside of your own inner reality. So that outer reflection is essentially what you're not willing to look at inside your inner reality. But when that inner reality, and you can face both the perception of the good and the perception of the bad, and not have any emotion to either or, and just see it in the pure love eminence of what it truly is, and that you're just two beautiful souls brought together to share forth creation, wisdom, and ultimately magnificence as a partnership as two individual entities, really strong, verbose, intelligent, great wisdom to bring forth, but together you have certain intricacies that work itself out. You're both willing to be vulnerable, you're willing to be humble, and you're willing to say yes to growth. I'll continue to talk about this more because for the next month I will be traveling with my partner, Koya, and we will be sharing more about what that means, about adventure, about exploration, about inner growth, about outer growth, and how we can show up in the world saying yes to support, saying yes to challenge, because you were saying yes to the wisdom that's inside of here. And to activate and to get clear on what this wisdom is, it requires a lot of inner work. It requires a lot of work of looking and becoming a student of your emotions. And a lot of the writings, a lot of things I share with people, I talked about being a student of your emotions. My clients love it. I really tend to think many of you are beginning to love it as well. So these videos will continue. This will be my last day in LA for a little while. I love you. Aloha.